Are you listening? Damn.
We told you we're bringing you hard-hitting honchos of the marketing world, and I'm joined in the podcast studio with Tlalane McWade, who is a general manager, marketing, for brand over at Nandos. A brand who everyone loves, right? Nandos has really become the tapestry of South African like wit and humor and the South African way. But, you know, there must be a huge job on your shoulders, right? To translate the Nandos brand to the people. How are you finding that?
Well, I mean, it's a fun job.
Yeah.
First and foremost, and I think that's one of the core principles we have at Nando's is we've got to have fun while making the chicken.
And it's good chicken.
Yeah, it is.
good chicken.
It's good chicken. I don't care which copycats say what they want to say. Nando's is good chicken.
Thank you, Lemon and Herb.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's fun. Of course, it's a big responsibility. We're also a brand who is very deliberate about what we do, what we say. You know, sometimes people think, oh, we're just being clever and witty, but we do spend a lot of time listening, debating internally. Obviously, that has to happen quickly when we're doing something like a social media post and everyone's talking about it now. We don't have time to debate for long, but we're a very deliberate brand. So it's a big responsibility, but it's a fun brand.
I think deliberate is really the word because it is very clear. I mean, the fact that you're able to turn around the social listening that you guys are doing and translate it into witty, thought through, and I think intelligent communication for me is very important. Nando's, unlike many brands, doesn't take for granted that your consumer's smart, you know, and I think that's where some of the leverages come through. But it must be pandemonium in the office. I mean, it must be like looking out the window constantly, making sure you're on the ground listening and hearing.
Well, I think it's something that's you've got to be very deliberate about how you structure and set up what you want to do. So if you want to achieve, which is what we do, a brand that people can relate to, that feels like the friend that's in the room, the friend that was there, that said the thing that nobody else wanted to say, or said the thing that we're like, oh my gosh, that was right on point. You've got to set your systems up in a way that allows that to happen, not ad hoc, as a constant thing. So that is just part of our day-to-day listening, breathing, existing. Listening to the consumer is just part of what we do.
That collaboration of listening to the consumer and making sure also that you keep the brand authentic, right? To not only selling chicken, but I might argue selling the South African story. For me, is very interesting. You have a background in working in the United Kingdom for Nando's, and again, you know, social listening here and there is very different. What have you found to be some of the differences with sort of how we attach ourselves to brands as opposed to our UK counterparts?
Well, I think, you know, the world has become much more homogenous than, say, 10, 20 years ago. So when I started in the industry, it is just unheard of or it's unfathomable how connected we are. Nowadays, anyone sitting on TikTok or Twitter, as we've seen with the whole South Africa, Nigeria thing, South Africa, America thing at the moment, you know, it's just global. And so there's a lot less difference than, say, 20 years ago, but there are still absolutely cultural differences. South Africa is a British colony, so we have a lot of similarities to the UK, but we have a lot of very real differences. We don't take ourselves very seriously. We love to laugh. We are a little bit irreverent, which are things you wouldn't find in the UK. You know, we also are so comfortable with law breaking and rules breaking and corruption that we just, you know, we have a sense of irreverence and therefore can laugh at things because a lot of things don't work as they should. You know, not necessarily a great thing, but we've gotten used to it and we found humor in that. Whereas in Europe, you often find, because they have a lot of systems and things that work, the train comes on time, the bus comes on time, I mean, NHS is maybe a bit of a tricky one because that's very topical and sensitive. So for them, there is a greater expectation of companies that's quite different in South Africa. In South Africa, and I think in Africa, we have a sense of, I'm going to make my future and no one's going to come through for me.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in first world countries, generally speaking, there's still an expectation of companies, government, etc., to provide a level of service that is needed in society. Like, it is your responsibility and you need to do this. Whereas we kind of, we've stopped believing in it, and it's such a bad thing, but we stopped believing in institutions to solve our issues.
I think that leads quite nicely to the idea that because so much of our culture, right, is about self-starting and getting on with the business of doing better for ourselves, that it's almost evident even in how brands talk to us. I mean, if you look at Nandos, Nandos for me is about a different kind of innovation, okay? In that Nandos was the first, as maybe, you know, people who in the movies and television where we broke the fourth wall. For the first time, Nandos didn't hide the fact that there were people who were writing copy and were on the ground and heard a conversation or saw an influencer do something or saw an event happen. They were like, bring it in, put it out there, right? And for me, that's interesting because it means that you already, when people weren't having the conversation that is being had on the ground, where we still had very highbrow marketing, Nandos was like, put it away. Talk to them like they know what's happening, you know, which is very interesting to me then when we start looking at the world of influencer marketing for us, where then how do you get people who are as good at telling your story as you are when you have a group of influencers? I'd be very interested to find out.
Oof, that is that.
Is that the $1 million question?
That is the $1 million question. And when I know, maybe I will just become a millionaire.
Yeah, okay. And share it, please.
But I do think the world of influencing or content, let's call it content creation, right? Because not everyone is necessarily a lifestyle unbox kind of person where they're trying to get you to buy something. Some people have huge followings just because they're great storytellers or whatever, like your Elise Myers, etc. And you know, it's forecasted to grow as an industry and be incredible. And I think what is so interesting just by sheer observation in that space is those who do well versus those still trying to find their voice. And the beauty of those who do well is just simply authentic, being authentic to themselves, right? So being authentic to yourself, whatever it is you found that people resonate with, the way you tell a story, the way you do a skit, the way you relay stories about your heartbreak or whatever it is, there's almost like there's success in everything. It's not just the makeup influencer who's doing well.
Makeup tutorials.
It's not just the fashion person. Elise Myers is an example who I've used before. Is never dressed up. Her hair's always a mess. And then she tells stories usually about herself that are embarrassing from before. And that just took off to a point where she was able to quit her day job. I mean, I think she's gone back now to working as well, but it really is about being authentic. And I think something that, and I hope I'm not jumping ahead in terms of your questions, but I think something South African creators can take encouragement in is don't follow a trend. Like, a lot of South African creators are all using the same filter with the big eyes and the big mouth and yes, there are things that help you get onto a For You page, the trending sound, the trending this, the trending that, but find a way to still be authentic to yourself. Because as a brand, when I want to work with people, if there are 50 people who all use that filter and the same sound, none of the 50 are going to be my choice because it's all the same. What's interesting about you? So just be yourself, because you might be surprised at what it is that's interesting about you that people latch onto, and then keep on with that, keep unearthing that.
Your view of the collaboration for me is very interesting, around, you know, getting influencers who, one, they're fresh when they content, and the differentiation between content creation and influencer for me is very important,
Right.
because as you say, you know, not everyone is trying to sell you something, but everyone's telling a story. And I think the content creation has become the next frontier, in my opinion, of where our industry is going as marketers. I'm interested in how you divide up what I'm going to call the traditional marketing, you know, what we learn in Marketing 101 in university, and what you've learned in the field, but particularly working in Nandos, where, may I use the word unorthodox? May I use the word, you know, you've turned a lot of things on its head. And for me, where do you find the sweet spot? Because at the end of the year, we still need to give numbers to the CEO and the board and have to report back on what happened in the year. But we who consume the Nando still go, what a great campaign. That was so much fun. How do you find the sweet spot between the traditional and this new age media, if I can turn it that way?
So econometrics in the marketing space will never not be important. You know, you hear a lot of talks, like today we're at a marketing conference and there's a lot of talk about how to get marketing represented at the C-suite, etc. That's not an issue for Nando's, let me say. And I think an important thing for marketers is to understand you can't be a marketer who doesn't understand numbers. That's the first thing.
Lovely.
You're not just, you know, when people say, oh, marketers just do the pretty stuff. And I'm like, in what world? I've never worked in a company where marketing was that. In fact, I sit with, you know, stats essay data, loads of research. You've got to constantly know what's happening in the world. And so in the traditional versus non-traditional space, it's about finding the metrics within the non-traditional space that are going to show you that you are starting to shift the needle, right? So a lot of work that you do when it comes to brand building, you can't directly see in the sales right now.
Yeah.
Some companies, unfortunately, are built in such a way where if I can't see the sales now, you're not doing that.
Yeah.
Sucks to work in a place like that because you're not going to get to do fun brand building marketing.
Yes.
But if you've got a C-suite who really understand the importance of brand building and how brand building puts money in the bank in the future, and you are rather looking at other metrics, engagement, impressions, you know, click-through rates, that kind of thing. But also, it's not just as simple as, here's a content creator, I have a bar of soap, talk about it on social media. I think something that we haven't gotten right, marketers around the world actually, is really tailoring our content for each platform. What you do on TikTok isn't what you do on Instagram. Isn't what you do on X. Those are very different platforms. I am not on TikTok to see a static image of a burger, and
aesthetic, beautiful lighting.
And I'll put my hand up. We've done that before, and I think because the world has also rapidly changed in a way that we haven't been able to dive in necessarily and fiddle with our potential brand risk. So I think marketers are nervous to just jump into social media and just fiddle and play, which sometimes you have to do.
And I think a big part of it is that they've been burnt before because it's a new platform in inverted commas. I mean, it's over a decade old, but I think people are still very scared of how to deal with it. You know, when the marketing directors of 1988 and 1998 are still very comfortable in, you say, a document, when you bring it into the C-suite, is very comfortable. We know what, you know, the ROI is.
If I put a TV ad during Sally McKinsey,
7 o'clock.
This number of people are going to be watching. I can definitely guarantee that. I put something out on social media, and if it's not so, generally speaking, if you look at any content creator, I mean, I would love to see someone show me a content creator who has organic posts, as in just them doing what they do, versus one where they're doing a paid partnership that's performed better than organic, almost never. And I think that comes down to brands being overly prescriptive.
You are nail coffin head where you're there, because we have such huge fights about, and I've seen it myself, I'm a content creator, and I know even the tone, your caption will be panel beaten into submission where even the way I speak doesn't translate. And for me, that is so interesting when you then look at the world of influencer marketing and then then is there a place for it going forward? Because the traditional marketers still view it as a nice to have, but we're seeing that there's so much happening in the space, and everyone that listens, it's one of the core
Yeah.
prescripts that you need to have
Yeah.
in your marketing matrix. And you've just highlighted a problem that we have with the paid for content, where the brand almost overly prescribes.
Yeah.
But Nando's, you see, is very different because, as you said, you've got the systems in
We've done
place.
it before. We've made our mistakes too.
But you've got the systems in place for you to be able to social listen at that rate and be able to turn out work at that rate means the systems are there. So maybe the question should be, what can you do to replicate those internal systems for you to churn out work on above the line for it to be able to work out on those various platforms?
You've got to understand the role of each medium. And I think that's where we struggle. We don't understand the role of content creation within the marketing mix. Within it is a medium of its own. So you've got TV, you've got radio, you've got social media, the stuff that you put out, but then you've got content creators who become a medium within a medium, but a very important one because Taylor Swift says go vote and 500,000 people register the next
day, very next day.
Right? So it's very important, but you've got to understand what each medium is trying to do. Are you just trying to do a mass reach? So what you do on TV isn't what you're going to do on social media. So you can't give the scripting you would give for a radio ad to a content creator. It doesn't translate. It's not. That's just not how people consume the medium. And it's to be fair, a lot of people, I have a friend whose mom's like, you don't need to go to school to marketing. Anybody can teach you to market.
Everyone can do it.
But actually, clearly not. Because you really have to sometimes be as logical as saying, when I go onto TikTok, what am I looking for? What are people going onto those mediums for? We're not going onto TikTok to be like, hey, here's a coffee. And when usually I tell hilarious, scandalous stories. People
in your robe and a bath towel.
Are going to scroll right past.
And you'll see that it's inauthentic.
Yeah.
Oh, finally, Tlalane, I can't keep you here all afternoon, but I really can. But we need you to go and enjoy some of the conference.
Yes.
In a short reply, maybe, what do you think the Africa context about marketing is about? You were so good at crystallizing exactly the difference between us and our European counterparts. And I'm excited to hear what you're going to say about where do you see the future of content creation, influencer marketing in South Africa, but marketing and branding in a broad sense, where like your mom's friend, everyone thinks you can do it. But I mean, Nando's is a clear example that there's so much thought that goes behind something that happens in a second. Where do you think it's going?
I think Africa as a continent is the most exciting place to be. Besides the fact that if there was a nuclear discharge, the safest place is going to be the tip of South Africa. Just in case anyone wanted to know, we're pretty safe. But I think Africa as a continent is an interesting place. An interesting place in that I think the world is starting to realize we're not just poor Africans who are in a dusty bowl without resources. We might have less resources than you and less sophistication than you, but we've got creativity. We've got enough data to be on their internet and have a voice. And I think we are, the world knows that we're in the ICJ with what's happening in the world.
Yes.
And so I think, and our artists are doing phenomenally on the global stage. So I think a lot of people are starting to pay attention to Africa. And I heard a stat that spoke about, as a continent, we have the youngest cohort of youth.
Yes.
The largest cohort of youth, which could be a problem, but it's actually a massive opportunity because that is eventually, hopefully TikTok wakes up soon enough, start having a creative fund in Africa where people can earn income. I know that's driven by advertising, etc. But where people start taking us seriously, money is flowing in terms of advertising, and the world takes us seriously. It's not, oh, you're an uppity African because you actually have self-confidence.
Yeah.
No, Africans are as valuable as anybody else, and what we have to say is as important, and what we're adding in terms of the world conversation and culture is just as important. And I think that is such an exciting place for Africa, and I think it's hello world, look out for us kind of thing.
Hello world from us uppity Africans in the tip of Africa. Tlalane McWade, I cannot put it better. A masterclass in branding and marketing from the Nandos group. And Nandos does it well. More to come today. If this is a highlight of what we have on the seat this afternoon, I think we've got a good day coming. So stay tuned.